Although the lab was enormous and had lots of staff, Andrew was the only one who managed to survive. He explained when the alarm went off, all military personnel went to secure the source on Site-36, but perished. Andrew had no choice but to initiate full lockdown. So, what exactly is 36? I asked. Well, Andrew started. It all began as an accident. Some miners were going about their business, and one day, they dug through this hidden cave system, so to say, which further led down to a huge, seemingly bottomless hole. Now, at first it was just an interesting tourist attraction, but then people reported hearing voices coming from down there. And then the first accident happened. You remember that little girl that disappeared a few years back? Katie Chandler? Alyssa interjected. Yeah. The official story was she just went missing during a field trip to the cave with her school. But in reality, she fell down the hole. Well, dragged down is more accurate. Wait, the teacher who took the class on the field trip claimed there was no way she could fall inside that hole. Andrew nodded. Yeah. As soon as the incident happened, the teacher was bribed and threatened by the government. The kids' stories of monsters were, of course, dismissed. We had our eyes on this place for a while as a precaution, but only after we saw Katie getting dragged down were our suspicions confirmed. After that, the military quarantined the zone. Our lab was set up here, and we have been studying the hole ever since. The public was told the area was closed off due to police searching for the missing girl. But something went wrong. Monsters occasionally kept emerging from the cave. We tried investigating the hole, but it was impossible. It was as if a completely different world was down there. And then they stopped coming out altogether. But the government wanted to know more about them, so they set up a social machine to draw them out. What? They created a link with the world down there via a machine. Let's call it a portal. But they underestimated the monsters, and soon thousands of them poured out of the portal and were set loose on the city. So, what about the rain? Interestingly enough, as the rain increases, so does the activity in the portal. We still don't know how they are connected, but one thing is for sure. The heavier the rain, the more dangerous they are. Doc, on our way here, the creatures outside were merging onto a big pile, and they weren't hostile towards us. Yes, the creatures seem to be operating in hive-like mind manner, and whatever is controlling them seems to be coming from the source. The portal. We believe they have a queen or something of the like. So, how do we stop them? Your best bet is to destroy the machine. It's very fragile, so a few bullets should do it. But that still leaves the monsters outside. Andrew nodded. Yes, and if the machine is destroyed, there may be a number of residual monsters coming out of the hole, the ones that managed to get into our world before the connection is severed, and chances are the government will nuke the city to prevent it from spreading. But if we close the portal, the monsters may get confused without the connection to their leader. I could then contact HQ, and they may conduct a full sweep and rescue mission. Wait, what are those creatures anyway? Well, we don't know exactly. Our research team believes they were dormant for centuries, and those miners woke them up when they dug out their sanctuary. We studied a few specimens, but we still barely know anything about them. Well, time for me to go. I stood up. Wait, take this. Andrew went to his desk and returned with a box of pills. It'll suppress the bacteria, but only for a very short time. Take one every hour and no sooner. The strain is highly adaptive and can develop resistance within days. Thanks, Doc. My mind was on autopilot, and I tried not to think about the fact that my time on this earth was limited. Alyssa stood up with the help of her crutch and opened her mouth to say something, but I could tell she had no idea what to say. There was nothing she could say to ease the situation. Don't worry. I'll bring him back, and then you need to keep him safe. I will, I promise, she said with glossy eyes. I coughed painfully and then said to her, You know, I planned on asking you out on a date once this was all done, despite being a stubborn bitch. I think we get along. Yeah, if you weren't so ugly, I'd say yes, she said, and we both laughed. I stared at the ground and then looked her in the eye. If I'm not back soon, you'll have to go on alone. She didn't respond, and the doctor escorted me out of the lab. He gave me an assault rifle which belonged to one of the soldiers and told me how to reach the source where the machine was. The lab itself was hidden behind a fake wall which could be raised and lowered, so that explained how the doc stayed safe this whole time. I stepped outside and turned back to the doctor. If you make it back, I'll see you on the camera feed and open the passage for you. Good luck, Andrew said and pushed a button which lowered the fake wall back down, leaving me in the empty mine. Hold on, Dewey, I said to myself and started walking. I soon reached the area where we first saw Father Martin, and from there I went inside the dark tunnel ahead. It slowly descended, and as it did, the air got colder, until I could see my breath in the air. After I started having a coughing fit, I popped one of the pills and continued, trying to steady my breathing. I felt fatigue taking me over, so I knew I was almost out of time. When I descended to the bottom, I started seeing lights from torches on the walls. As I continued, the rock walls and floors changed into a metallic corridor. I followed the only path ahead of me, until I heard voices in front. It was a mixture of adult and child voices. I hurried up and saw in front of me a huge area with a tall ceiling and an enormous hole in the ground. The hole was glowing brightly, and it looked like it had a sort of whirlpool in it. On the other side of it was a big generator-like machine. This was definitely the place I was looking for. I arrived just in time to see Martin and his man throw a woman into the hole. Her scream was abruptly cut off when she fell inside the vortex, which became turbulent before calming down again. Praise to be 36, Martin raised his arms and shouted. The men around him repeated the phrase 3 more times. Now, Dewey, Martin turned towards the kid. Your role is at hand. You'll perform a great deed here. Fuck you, Dewey spewed at Martin, making him and a few other men chuckle. Come now. Martin pushed Dewey towards the hole and stepped back. Dewey fell near the edge on his hands and knees and stared at the vortex, which started to become violent again. I aimed my gun at the generator. It was far away, but I was confident I could hit it. Black tentacles started to merge from the hole and slithered their way towards Dewey, as a deep groan echoed from the hole itself all around the cave. Without any time to think, I pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the machine with a loud clank, and the sound of electrical shocks filled the air. The vortex in the hole disappeared just like that, and the tentacles writhed, severed on the ground, purple blood oozing out of them. The deep groan from before turned into a scream of agony, and the cave began to shake. No! What did you do? Multiple screams came from the now dark hole, and monsters started to emerge. They wasted no time pulling Martin's men into the hole or slaughtering them on sight. Most of his men had already escaped, some deeper into the cave, and others ran past me, ignoring me in their panic. Come back, you cowards! Martin shouted as screams echoed around him. Dewey, come on! I shouted in the whole mess, and the boys started running towards me. A thin creature with sharp claws and teeth pursued him on all fours, and just as it leapt to grab him, I shot the creature and knocked it backwards. It didn't move again. Come on! I pushed Dewey forward, and we both ran as quickly as our legs and the shaking ground allowed us to. We ran unsteadily through the tremors, and I heard cave-ins behind us. My chest was on fire, and I was already out of breath. Dewey, run! I said between breaths, and continued staggering. And then I felt a powerful force knock the air out of me. I dropped the gun and fell on my side. You'll pay for that, Martin said as he punched me over and over. He then put his hands around my throat and started choking me. You ruined everything, he said, squeezing so hard that my vision got darker by the second. I'll kill you for what you've done. I raised my hands and punched Martin at the forearms as hard as I could, making his grip loosen. I then coughed up some blood in his face and kicked him away from me with the remaining strength. I turned around on my stomach and started crawling towards the gun on the ground. No, you don't, Martin said from behind, and I felt myself getting dragged back by the feet. I turned back around to see him holding a big rock above his head. I raised my hands in defense, and a loud bang ensued. Martin dropped the rock, and a large red stain appeared on his chest. He stared at me in disbelief before finally falling down dead. Rotten hell, you piece of shit, Alyssa said, holding the gun, with Dewey behind her. Come on, let's go, she said, and helped me up as much as she could with her bad leg. Screams started to fill the air behind us. We ran back inside the lab, and Andrew closed the secret passage just in time for the monsters to slam into the impregnable wall. I fell on my knees, coughing violently. When I finally stopped, I felt weaker than ever, so much that I could barely stand. I lay on the bed, while Andrew contacted HQ via radio. A few minutes later, he got a response, and the military confirmed they would eliminate the remaining monsters and perform a search and rescue immediately. You did it, Alyssa told me as she held my hand, but I couldn't respond since I fell out of consciousness. I woke up some time later on the same bed. Alyssa and a bunch of other doctors were around me. Good, he's stable. Is he gonna be okay? I looked around and saw military people talking to Andrew and more doctors walking around the lab. If we had arrived a few minutes late, he would have been dead, the doctor said. He can never be rid of the infection, but the bacteria will remain dormant as long as he takes the medication. You'll have to keep a close eye on him, and if there's even the slightest change, I know. I'll take care of him. The doctors left, and Alyssa sat next to me with a big smile and squeezed my hand. Hey, you hear that? You'll be all right. I closed my eyes and squeezed back. There were no news coverage about the incident, and all rescued survivors were forced to sign an NDA about the whole deal, under the threat of incarceration and even execution. The official reported story was that there was a virus outbreak, which has since been contained, despite the numerous casualties. Months later, I live a normal life, albeit with a lower lung capacity. Dewey lives with his aunt now, but Alyssa and I make sure to visit him every week. Everyone else seems to be back living their old mundane life, too. And no one talks about the rain incident. One thing still bothers me, though. Whenever it rains, I always hear something when I'm home. Something that puts me on edge and takes me back to the day when the whole incident started. Something that's always just loud enough for me to hear, no matter what I'm doing, or where I am in my house. The unmistakable sound of footsteps splashing in my backyard.